Yeah, so if you want that memory of that, right? If you want to remember what it was to be there, then that's what's important, right? If you're looking for Instagram likes, yeah, you can make yourself really unhappy, right? But
Welcome to the Crossing It Off podcast, the internet's #1 bucket list show, where we believe your bucket list can be more than a social media brag, but bring you deep joy in your life. Each week we share the stories of people just like you that are living out their bucket/life goal list. I am your host, Roger Williams, and through hearing our guest adventures, my goal is that you will find inspiration and empowerment to add and cross items off your list. When you find something here that motivates you, we ask that you share this episode with one other person and rate and review the show. Let's get to crossing it off. Welcome everybody to the show. I'm so glad you're here with us this week. And so many times on our bucket list, we have things that other people have as well. And it's hard sometimes to make them our own. And I'm excited for our guest to be here today, because he's crossed something off his bucket list that lots of people have done and struggled with just that, how to make it his own item that he's going to cross off. So I'd love to introduce Don Orkoskey. He describes himself as a photographer, teacher, explorer, and community builder. Don, thank you so much for being here.
yeah, thank you for having me. I'm really excited.
Yeah, me too. So tell our audience listeners what you crossed off your list.
Sure. Photograph Yosemite National Park.
Okay, so this is a topic I'm pretty interested in. So first off, before we get into photography, like, why Yosemite? Why did you pick Yosemite? What was important for you to go there and photograph it?
For me, Yosemite is one of those places that, I mean, it's impossible for everyone in the world. There's 7 billion people, but it would be lovely if everyone could see it. It's just, it's incredibly impressive and something that I wanted to see myself. So from the giant sequoias to just Yosemite Valley and so much more of the park that, I've always wanted to go.
Okay, and then were you a photographer before this trip? Was this something you wanted to do, when you got there, was to make it your own, or where did the photography end come in for you?
Yeah, so I'm a professional photographer. I do a fair amount of nature photography, make most of my money as a photographer as an event and portrait photographer, and I teach photography. So, and I've been doing that for 24 years at this point. So, and I love it. I love being a photographer, and it's a big part of who I am and what I do. So, no matter where I go, I've got a camera with me.
Awesome. So we've got the park that you want to go visit because it's beautiful and it has lots of scenery and stuff in it. And then we have photography that you're passionate about, obviously, as you make it your career. When did you decide, like, I want to put this on my list? What was the driving? When did you decide that? And what was the driving factor for saying, I want to go photograph Yosemite?
I think it has been on my list for a long time. It's also on my wife's list. And we got together in 2019 and got married in 2020. So during the pandemic.
Congratulations on that, achieving that goal in itself.
Thanks. Yeah, that was an interesting challenge, having a wedding during COVID, but we did it outside and only had a small group of family and friends there. So it was something on her bucket list as well. Yeah, we actually had avoided getting COVID. We take a lot of precautions, and I was teaching a photo workshop, and about 2 days later started to feel stuffy, and took some tests and was negative. Took some tests the next day when I couldn't get out of bed and was positive. So unfortunately, she got it as well. But the end result of that was that we felt like, okay, we've had it while we're still, fairly new to it. I mean, we've been boosted and everything like that as well. We figured this is the time to jump on a plane and go to California. So and just do it. So that's what we did.
Awesome. What were some of the things like you were expecting As far as planning the trip, what were some of the things you were planning for? What were some of the things that you were excited about before you got there?
Plans. I'm a big planner, and not that I mean I'm like super hyper organized, but that I plan big. Glacier Point Road, which is a road that leads to some of the best overlooks looking into the valley,
Hmm.
is closed this year. So there are hikes that you can do to some of those places, but you're going up 3,000 feet. There,
Hmm.
some of them are 13-mile long hikes.
Oh yeah.
So one way. So and so I had this big plan of we're going to get there and we're going to hike the Pahono Trail to Glacier Point and then hike back because Glacier Point itself is closed. That we were going to hike to Nevada Falls and do all of the sort of iconic hikes in Yosemite. We got there, tunnel view. You come through from the south entrance. You come into the valley through a tunnel on the Wawona Road, and it opens up, and you see El Capitan, and you see Half Dome in the distance, and Bridal Veil Falls, and it's just incredible, and it's this iconic view of Yosemite Valley, and that's where the trail starts that heads to Glacier Point. And looking up at just how like we're not down in the valley, we're still we're still 1,000 feet above the floor of the valley,
Wow.
and looking up at the way we would have to start, and I'm like, yeah, I don't think that's gonna happen. So big plans, but we had to adjust a lot once we got there. Regardless of that, we had an absolutely incredible time. So
So as a photographer, this interests me greatly, as I mentioned as we started the show. There are places that everybody goes, that a lot of people have on their bucket list. For me, it's Angkor Wat. I know a lot of people want to go to Angkor Wat in Cambodia, and there's usually like only like two or three pictures that people walk away from because it's like I have to get the same picture everybody else does. How did you, once you got there, how did you kind of look at the situation and try to figure out how to take a different picture, like something that somebody wouldn't mistake for an Ansel Adams or another famous photographer? How
yeah.
did you decide how to take different pictures to make that experience your own instead of look like everybody else's?
So that was a big fear of mine, honestly. I'm not like a, a grand vista landscape photographer,
Hmm.
but you can't help but take those pictures. And like the picture, that iconic picture of Angkor Wat that, when you think of Angkor Wat, you think of that photo, right? So because everybody, whether it's with a cell phone or
Right.
a large format camera, everyone takes that picture. But so that was a huge fear for me. It was like I'm more detail oriented. I do a lot of wildlife, birds and insects, macro photography when I'm out in nature, and everything that because I prepared and I was reading, googling things, and everyone says if you want wildlife, you got to go to Yellowstone. Don't go to Yosemite, which isn't true.
Hmm.
There is a lot of wildlife. I mean, it's the high Sierras are full of
Sure.
incredible animals. So that was one thing that reading all this discouraging stuff, I was like, you know what? No, because I'm a bit of a contrarian. I said I'm gonna find plenty of things, and it really I really did. I mean, I took that several shots from tunnel view. There's the overlook when you come out of the tunnel, because you can't not take some of those
Right.
photos. But that's fine. I'm not expecting to sell that to anyone, right? But in terms of finding different ways to photograph, the details is where to start, right?
Hmm.
So because it's already a big focus of mine, getting into the details, seeing the little things. And when I say little things, I don't mean necessarily insects small. I mean like I have a photo that I took of sort of the bottom of the face of Half Dome of a number of pines, and just the it's a landscape photo. It's a broad view,
Right.
but because Half Dome itself is so massive, it's in everyone's pictures of Half Dome, but you don't see the iconic shape of Half Dome. You see the back of behind these trees is Half Dome. But
Hmm.
if you don't know that, if I don't tell you that's Half Dome, it just looks like this impressive granite wall. And so that for me was the first thing. Was looking for these details. The second thing really is for me, it's all about light. Like I lead nature walks here in I'm in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And I lead nature walks monthly, and during the pandemic, I was doing it weekly, every Saturday morning. So, and I attracted a ton of birders, and they're like, "Here's this warbler, and here's, there's a yellow belly woodpecker, and they're fairly rare, and in terms of like in this area." And I don't know that they actually are rare, but but these are folks that track the birds that they saw, and they can identify them, and it's part of what they do is identifying them.
Mm.
And that's I love to photograph birds, but that's not me. I'm not a birder. If it's a mourning dove or a robin, which are really common species here, if it's lit well, if it's a good composition, that's what I'm excited for. So, and most of that starts with light, right? So, how the light is hitting it, what shapes and lines and textures and all of these things are involved in that composition, essentially.
Did you have a what I would assume people call a shot list? Like, did you have like I'm gonna go get these pictures, or is this just a long extended hike where you're constantly surveying and trying to find that angle, that light, that those lines?
Yeah, part of my because it's a 3 hour time difference, part of my initial plan was that, let's just forget about getting jet lagged. Let's get up at, 4 in the morning and head to the valley before the sun comes up. But in practice, we adjusted to the local time and didn't do that. So it was this was in many ways a relaxing vacation for us. It was an escape from the usual. And I mean, it was partly to photograph Yosemite, but it was also to have summer vacation, right? And cross this off
Right.
our bucket list and actually be in the moment and observe what we're seeing. And that's important too, when it comes to what you're photographing, because if you're not in the moment, if you're looking for that next shot, if you're getting anxious because how am I going to do it, or that everyone else is doing the same thing, or what I see often in teaching, I have students that say like, I worry because I've got this nice camera and people I think they're looking at me and they expect me to take a great
Mm,
shot because I have this great camera. And I said honestly, and what I say to those folks is honestly, no, people aren't. Like people are looking at, especially if it's a stunning scene, right? They're looking at the scenery, they're thinking about their own picture, whether it's just with a cell phone or they've got a nice camera. They're not really concentrating on what you're doing, so you're fine. But I understand that having that kind of social anxiety of of needing. I've got this great camera. I need to get
right.
this great shot.
Here at the Crossing It Off podcast, we are passionate about inspiring you in your bucket list lifestyle and empowering you to live out your list. We offer many resources to assist you in your bucket list journey, such as web resources in the show notes, bucket list mentoring services, my book Live Out Your Lists, a private Facebook group for you to share your bucket list success stories with others, and more. All of these can be found at crossingitoffpodcast.com. Find the resource that fits your need so that you can live out your list. Now back to the show.
But so for me, no, it was really seeing what was around the next bend. Like I read plenty of stuff. I looked at YouTube videos of individual hikes, watching them on twice the speed, right? So
Right.
there's some like 4 hour videos of 4 hour hikes out
Oof.
there. So no, so I wanted to have an idea of what to expect and planned for the time of day that we would be in different
Mm,
places. So um, and with landscape photography, especially the the gnarlier the sky looks, the better your pictures are going to be.
Yeah.
So you want kind of interesting weather. If you are hiking and you're carrying, some food and you're carrying enough water and you're going 3,000 feet up and 3,000 feet back down, you know, you don't want to be rained on,
Right.
right?
No,
So,
no, no.
so, um, and honestly, for us, the weather almost every day it was cloudless blue skies, which from
Doesn't
a
help. Yeah.
from a photography standpoint, that doesn't lend itself well to these grand vistas. But if you're focused on the details, if you're looking at how the light is hitting off this rock, or how the rock is sitting in the river, like we went to the Ptolemy Meadow, and the Ptolemy River runs through there, and so there's rocks that are in the river, these big, hunks of granite, and there's the granite mountains peeking out in the back, and it's you are tempted to get that grand shot of the mountains in the back, and and that's fine. And even if it's midday, even if it's the clear blue sky, you can do that. Um, there's nothing wrong with those pictures, or taking those pictures. Again, they're not going to compete, right, with, you're not going to get the Instagram likes or whatever that you would if it was a snowstorm happening,
Right.
right, or daybreak. But if it makes you happy, if you like it, if you
Mm,
want to remember that, right, if you want to think about, yeah, so that if you want that memory of that, right, if you want to remember what it was to be there, then that's what's important, right? If you're looking for Instagram likes, yeah, you can make yourself really unhappy, right? But if what you're looking for is just to remember being there, to capture something that matters to you, then go for it, right? So, but focusing on those details was really what helped me find some incredible compositions as photos.
cool. So you went with your wife. Is she also a photographer?
She is not.
Okay.
um, I mean, she does all right taking photos, but she wouldn't call herself a photographer. By my definition, because to be a photographer, there's no licensing, right? You don't have
Right.
to pass a
Right.
board exam. If you take photos, you're a photographer. There are good photographers and there are not great photographers, right? Like it's, if you take pictures, you're a photographer. That's what I tell all of my students, because people say that a lot. I'm not a photographer. Yeah, you are. You
Yeah.
are. If you compare yourself, yes, to Ansel Adams, did I get this picture that would blow people away more than Ansel Adams photos? Sure, maybe you're not at that level, but you're still a photographer, right? So,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, she no, my wife is finishing her dissertation writing about cosmic Soviet sci-fi. So very
Okay.
interesting stuff. Yeah,
That would be interesting. When she's done with that, I'd like to have her on the show.
for
Don, what
sure.
was it like for you in the moment as you're crossing that off, as you're there in Yosemite and you're being able to take these pictures? What were you feeling or thinking when that process was happening?
I mean, I can't speak for anyone else, but me personally, the word sublime is the best word that I think can describe the just everything that was in front of my eyes, but it doesn't even begin to touch on it, because everywhere we went, every little vignette, every little view, every peek through the trees was just magnificent. The entire place. There's 2-lane roads, right? So they do have turnoffs, but as you might expect, people that are driving are looking all around, right? It's hard not to. And so people tend to drive a bit slower. So they do have turnoffs for people to pull into. But there are times when you're behind 30 cars because somebody's just in awe of what they're looking at. And it's completely understandable. I felt the same thing, like looking at just every direction. You could turn 360 degrees and it was magnificent. And just the words escape me really. So it's hard not to be in the moment, honestly. I mean, if you were really stressed because you're like, I want this particular picture and you have this vision, maybe, maybe you could stress yourself out of the moment,
Right.
but it but it just grabs you. These 1,000-year-old gigantic sequoia trees, and the even like the sequoia trees, there were groves, the Mariposa Grove and I think Ptolemy Grove, um, and then they sort of dot Yosemite here and there as well. But in the valley, it's mostly ponderosa, which ponderosa pines are giant as well. They're huge. Um, but just everywhere you look, it's just majestic. There's from waterfalls and the granite rock faces. Yeah, it's hard to not be there when you're there. If that makes
Sure.
sense.
Sure. So now let's talk after you're there.
Mm.
So you've crossed it off, you've come home. What's the one thing? Actually, I'm going to ask you for two things. What changed you? What was the change or the transformation you saw in yourself as a photographer through this experience and as just Don?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think in terms of as a photographer, the changes that I saw, because I'm not generally a landscape photographer, I don't often take a series of photos and stitch them together. I don't know if you're familiar with how photographers can do that, but that was something that I did, and because I'm an event photographer, I tend to, and maybe this is a bit technical, but I tend to use a wider aperture. That's the opening of the lens that allows, more light to come in, or less light to come in, but also affects how much stuff is in focus.
Mhm.
Um, but because I don't normally do events, that is I normally work with a wider open aperture just because lighting is not always great at events. And for this, I was stopped down. I was using a smaller aperture, so it got me to do things and taking some grand vistas. It got me to do a lot of things that were sort of outside of what I typically do as a photographer myself, which is great because a lot of times I'm teaching people that want to do landscape photography, and it's not, I'm teaching them the basics of photography, but experiencing that myself and sort of pushing myself to do more landscape was really helpful. In terms of me personally, I think that I probably my patience grew. Not only patience for myself, but patience in terms of if you've taken any flights this year or heard about how the condition of the airline industry this year. We nearly got stranded in Fresno on our flight back, but I calmly sort of persevered through. They told us to line up and talk to the people that were there, and they would get us rescheduled. But the entire plane
Mhm.
was in this line, and so we were in near the back of the line, and I said, you know what? They have an 800 number. I'm going to call their customer service. And I persisted through. I was very, I wasn't rude at all. I was very polite to the woman I was talking to. And she says, nope, you can stay in Fresno and we'll get you on a flight at 6 in the morning tomorrow. And no, 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 no. I need, like, what about the other airlines? What about this? What about this? Giving her all sorts of options. Finally got exhausted everything she could do. And she put me on with the supervisor. And it worked out. We ended up it wasn't even their fault. It was a weather delay.
Sure.
So, but they were telling us we were not going to be able to make our connecting flight. And it dawned on me as I'm talking to the supervisor that if we have a weather delay, our connecting flight probably has a weather delay. So, and he verified that and everything worked out. But patience, for myself, and I think it added some resiliency and perseverance as well. Yeah, I think I learned a lot. Really. Patience also following, 30 cars behind somebody
There
driving
you
very
go.
slow.
There you go. So, what is next on your list that you'd like to cross off?
Oh, next. So my wife is from Russia, and she's over here getting her dissertation, and because of COVID, and now because of this atrocious war that's happening that Russia's waging in Ukraine, we have not been able to get over and visit her family, and I desperately want to do that. So that's the next thing on the bucket list is hopefully this war will end, and hopefully things will change. I won't
Yeah.
say what we want to see change in Russia, because I don't want this to prevent me from getting a visa.
Yeah.
but hopefully that will change sooner than later, and we'll get over to visit her parents. And she's from Siberia, and
Mm,
there's beautiful, absolutely beautiful stuff over there to photograph. So I want to go to Stolby, which is outside of Krasnoyarsk, where she's from. So.
nice. Nice. Awesome. Thanks, Don, for sharing your experience with us and telling us we can kind of make things unique for ourselves. Where can people find you online to follow your photography or get in touch with you for work?
Sure. So my website is wdophoto.com. Those are my initials. My first name is actually William. So wdophoto.com. I'm on all the socials under WDO Photo, as well as Orkoskey. Orkoskey.com I also own. And that's I'm transitioning into more of my nature work there. Yeah, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all that stuff.
Awesome.
Orkoskey or WDO Photo. Yeah.
Yeah, we will put all those links in the show notes so people can get right to you. Don, again, thank you so much for coming and sharing and helping us kind of make things our own as we have things that everybody else is doing so on our list. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, I greatly appreciate it. Thanks for doing this. This is an amazing podcast. I love listening, so I'm excited to have gotten a chance to be on it myself.